The scene opens with Sophia stepping out of her sleek black car, the kind that whispers success without shouting it. She pauses for a moment under the soft glow of the restaurant's awning, her high heels clicking faintly against the pavement as she adjusts the strap of her designer handbag. Her face is calm but carries an unmistakable weight, lines etched not by age but by years of relentless ambition and emotional solitude. Sophia isn't just any woman. She's a force to be reckoned with. At 42, she has built an empire from scratch. Ideal luxury skincare line catering to women who value both indulgence and authenticity. But tonight, there's no glimmer of pride in her eyes, only exhaustion. The day had been long, filled with back-to-back meetings, emails demanding immediate responses, and yet another networking event where everyone smiled too wide and laughed too loud. It was all so hollow. She pushes open the heavy glass door of Le Jardin, a fine dining establishment known for its exclusivity and discretion. This place isn't about showing off, it's about escaping, and right now, escape is exactly what Sophia needs. As she walks toward the hostess stand, her sharp gaze scans the room instinctively, taking note of every detail. The crystal chandeliers casting warm light over pristine white tablecloths, the quiet murmur of conversation blending seamlessly with the soft jazz playing in the background. "Good evening," says the hostess warmly, snapping Sophia back to reality. "Do you have a reservation?" "Yes," Sophia replies curtly, though not unkindly. Her voice is polished, practiced, the kind that commands respect without raising its volume. Under Hartley, the hostess nods and gestures for her to follow. They weave through the tables until they reach a secluded corner near the window, where the city lights twinkle like distant stars. Sophia settles into her seat, placing her phone face down beside her napkin. For once, she doesn't check it immediately. Instead, she exhales deeply, allowing herself this rare moment of stillness. It's then that he approaches. He moves with quiet confidence, balancing a tray with effortless grace. His uniform, a crisp white shirt tucked neatly into black trousers, is simple yet immaculate. He introduces himself with a polite nod. "Good evening, ma'am. My name is Ethan. I'll be your server tonight." His voice is steady, his accent neutral, but there's something intriguing about him. Maybe it's the way his dark eyes seem to linger just a fraction longer than necessary, or perhaps it's the faint hint of amusement tugging at the corners of his mouth. Whatever it is, Sophia feels an unexpected flicker of curiosity. "I'm not sure what I want yet," she says after glancing briefly at the menu. Her tone is dismissive, almost reflexive, but Ethan doesn't flinch. "No rush," he replies, smoothly. "Sometimes the best choices come when we stop trying to make them." Sophia raises an eyebrow, caught off guard by the remark. It's thoughtful, insightful even, not something she'd expect from someone in his position. Or maybe that's part of the problem. She's already made assumptions about him based solely on his role here, hasn't she? Before she can dwell on it further, Ethan continues, "If you'd like, I can recommend the chef's special. It's a dish that surprises most people." There's a pause, just long enough for Sophia to feel slightly uncomfortable. Is he mocking her? Testing her? She can't quite tell, but instead of snapping back, she finds herself intrigued. "All right," she says finally. "Surprise me." Ethan smiles faintly, a gesture that doesn't quite reach his eyes, and turns to leave. As he walks away, Sophia watches him go, her thoughts swirling. There's something different about him, something she can't quite put her finger on. Maybe it's the way he carries himself, or maybe it's the fact that he didn't fawn over her like so many others tend to do. Either way, she's curious, and curiosity, she knows, is dangerous. As Sophia waits for Ethan to return with her order, her gaze drifts toward the window. Beyond the glass, the city buzzes with life, cars streaming past, pedestrians weaving through the streets, skyscrapers glowing like beacons in the night. But none of it touches her. She feels distant, as though she's watching the world from behind an invisible barrier. It's a feeling she's grown accustomed to over the years, one that comes with being at the top. Her journey to this point wasn't easy. Born into a modest family in a small Midwest town, Sophia learned early on that opportunities weren't handed out. They had to be fought for. Her father worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table, and Her mother spent her days sewing clothes to sell at local markets. They instilled in her the value of hard work, resilience, and independence. But they also taught her something else, the importance of appearances. You can't let them see you sweat, her mother used to say, smoothing out the wrinkles in one of her handmade dresses. People respect confidence, even if it's fake. And so Sophia learned to wear masks. At school, she was the bright, ambitious student who always raised her hand first. In college, she was the intern who stayed late, determined to prove herself in a male-dominated industry. And when she finally launched her own business at 30, she became the polished entrepreneur who never let anyone see her doubt or fear. But success came at a cost. Her marriage crumbled under the weight of her relentless drive. Her husband, once supportive, grew tired of playing second fiddle to her career. "You're married to your work," he'd said during their final argument, his voice heavy with resignation. "I'm just the guy who happens to live here." He wasn't wrong. After the divorce, Sophia threw herself even deeper into her company, using it as both a shield and a distraction. By day, she was the picture of strength, closing deals, giving interviews, attending galas. By night, she was alone, staring at the ceiling and wondering if she'd sacrificed too much for too little. Now, sitting in this restaurant, she feels the familiar ache of emptiness creeping in. She has everything money can buy: a luxurious penthouse, designer clothes, a thriving business, but none of it fills the void inside her. What she wants, what she's always wanted, is connection, not the superficial kind she finds at networking events or charity galas, but something real, something genuine. Sophia's eyes flicker back to Ethan as he approaches with her meal. There's no pretense in the way he carries himself, no attempt to impress or ingratiate. He simply places the plate in front of her with quiet efficiency, then steps back slightly, waiting to see if she needs anything else. This looks... Sophia trails off, searching for the right word. The dish before her is beautifully plated, almost too perfect to eat. Yet there's a simplicity to it, a sense of care, rather than ostentation. Different. That's the idea, Ethan says, his tone light but sincere. Sometimes the simplest things leave the strongest impression. Sophia looks up at him, surprised by the comment. Most servers would have nodded politely and moved on, eager to please without engaging. But Ethan seems unbothered by convention. There's a stillness about him, a quiet assurance that makes her wonder what lies beneath the surface. "Do you believe that?" she asks impulsively, surprising even herself. "That simple things matter more?" Ethan tilts his head slightly, considering the question. "I think people spend so much time chasing complexity that they forget how powerful simplicity can be. A good conversation, a shared laugh, a moment of honesty, those are the things that stay with us." His words linger in the air between them, resonating in a way Sophia doesn't expect. For a brief moment, she allows herself to imagine what it might be like to live without pretense, without the constant pressure to perform, to simply be. But then reality intrudes. She shakes her head almost imperceptibly, dismissing the thought. He's just a waiter, after all, someone whose job is to serve her, not philosophize with her. Still, she can't deny the spark of curiosity. "He's ignited. Thank you," she says finally, picking up her fork. "For the recommendation." Ethan nods, his expression unreadable. "Enjoy your meal." As he walks away, Sophia takes a bite of the dish. It's exquisite, not because it's flashy or extravagant, but because it's balanced, thoughtful. Each flavor complements the others without overwhelming them. It's the kind of dish that reminds her of home-cooked meals from her childhood, when food was about nourishment and love, rather than presentation and status. For the first time in months, she feels a flicker of peace, and maybe, just maybe, a hint of hope. While Sophia savors her meal, lost in thought, Ethan moves through the restaurant with practiced ease. To the casual observer, he's just another server, polite, efficient, unremarkable. But if anyone were to look closer, they might notice the subtle details that set him apart. The way his hands move with precision when setting down a glass, the quiet authority in his voice as he greets each table, the faint creases around his eyes that suggest years of experience far beyond this role. Ethan isn't who he appears to be. At 37, he's amassed a fortune most people can only dream of, a tech empire built on innovation and intuition. He started young, coding late into the night in a cramped apartment while working odd jobs to make ends meet. By 25, he'd sold his first app for millions. By 30, he was worth billions. And by 35, he'd walked away from it all. The decision to leave wasn't easy. For years, Ethan had thrived on the adrenaline rush of building something from nothing. The thrill of outsmarting competitors, the satisfaction of seeing his ideas come to life. But somewhere along the way, the game changed. Success brought attention, and attention brought complications. People no longer saw him as Ethan. They saw him as the billionaire. Friends became acquaintances. Relationships turned transactional, and every conversation felt like a negotiation. So, he disappeared. Or at least, he tried to. He sold off properties, dissolved partnerships, and erased his digital footprint as much as possible. Then, under the guise of anonymity, he took a job as a waiter at Le Jardin. It wasn't about humility or punishment. It was about finding clarity. In this quiet corner of the world, he could observe humanity without judgment, listen without expectation, and connect without pretense. But even here, among strangers, Ethan struggles with a question that haunts him. Can anyone truly see past the surface? Or are we all doomed to be defined by our roles, our wealth, our reputations? As Ethan clears plates from a nearby table, his mind drifts back to the day he decided to leave everything behind. It was during a charity gala in New York, a glittering affair attended by celebrities, politicians, and CEOs. He stood on the balcony overlooking the ballroom, sipping champagne and watching the crowd below. Everyone was smiling, laughing, shaking hands. Yet beneath the polished veneer he saw desperation. Deals being brokered over hors d'oeuvres, compliments exchanged like currency, connections forged not out of genuine interest but mutual benefit. That's when it hit him. None of these people knew him. They didn't care about his passions, his fears, his dreams. All they cared about was what he could offer them, his money, his influence, his name. And worse, he realized he'd become one of them. He'd stopped asking questions because he already knew the answers. He'd stopped listening because everyone wanted something from him. The next morning, he called his assistant and told her to cancel all his meetings. Then he packed a single suitcase, booked a flight to Europe, and disappeared. For months he traveled aimlessly, staying in hostels, wandering through villages, talking to strangers who had no idea who he was. Slowly, he began to remember what it felt like to be human, to laugh without calculating, to share without expecting anything in return. Eventually, he returned to the States, settling in a small coastal town where no one recognized him. That's when he found Le Jardin. The owner, an elderly Frenchman named Marcel, hired him on the spot after a brief interview. "You have good hands," Marcel had said, nodding approvingly. "And you listen well." Listening, that's what Ethan does best. Every night, as he serves customers their meals, he listens to their stories. Some talk about their careers, others about their families. A few confess secrets they've never told anyone else. Ethan doesn't judge. He simply observes, filing away fragments of humanity like pieces of a puzzle. For Ethan, working as a waiter isn't just a disguise, it's a test, a way to see if people can look beyond appearances and recognize authenticity. Most don't. They treat him with polite indifference, barely acknowledging his presence unless they need something. But occasionally someone stands out, someone like Sophia. He noticed her the moment she walked in, not because of her designer clothes or confident stride, but because of the way she carried herself, as though she were holding the weight of the world on her shoulders. There was vulnerability in her gaze, a flicker of sadness that reminded him of himself before he left his old life behind. When he approached her table, he didn't expect much. Wealthy clients often treated servers as invisible, speaking only when necessary and rarely making eye contact. But Sophia surprised him. She listened when he spoke, responded with genuine curiosity, and seemed genuinely interested in what he had to say. It was refreshing and unsettling. Part of him wanted to keep his distance, to protect himself from the inevitable disappointment. That came with forming attachments. But another part, the part that still believed in the possibility of real connection, wanted to know more about her. Who was this woman who looked so powerful, yet felt so fragile? What was she searching for? As Ethan refills Sophia's water glass, he catches her watching him again. This time, she doesn't look away. Instead, she smiles faintly, almost shyly, before returning her attention to her meal. Ethan feels a pang of something unfamiliar, hope, perhaps, or maybe just curiosity. If you're enjoying this story so far, consider subscribing to our channel for more captivating narratives that explore the complexities of human connection. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next chapter. Over the next few weeks, Sophia finds herself returning to Le Jardin with increasing frequency. At first, it's almost accidental. She tells herself she's drawn to the restaurant because of its ambiance, the quality of the food, or the fact that it's conveniently located near her office. But deep down, she knows the truth. She's coming back for him. Ethan notices, of course. He always does. It's not just that she requests his section every time she visits. It's the way she lingers over her meals, savoring each bite as though trying to prolong the experience, or the way her eyes follow him when he moves through the room, watching him with a mixture of curiosity and something else, something softer. Their conversations start small but quickly grow deeper. One evening, as he clears her plate, Sophia asks casually, "Do you enjoy working here?" Ethan pauses, tilting his head slightly, as if considering the question. "It's peaceful," he says finally. "People come here to escape, even if only for a little while. I like being part of that." Sophia nods thoughtfully, swirling the last sip of wine in her glass. "I suppose I'm one of those people. You don't strike me as someone who needs to escape often," Ethan replies, his tone light but probing. "You seem in control." The comment catches her off guard. "Control isn't always freedom," she murmurs, more to herself than to him. Then, realizing what she said, she adds quickly, "What about you? Do you ever feel trapped by routine?" Ethan smiles faintly, the kind of smile that doesn't quite reach his eyes. Routine can be comforting, predictable, safe, but safety isn't always what we need. His words hang in the air between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. Sophia feels a strange pull toward him, as though he's speaking directly to a part of her she's tried to ignore. She wants to ask more, to dig deeper, but the moment passes when another customer signals for his attention. "Excuse me," Ethan says politely, stepping away. As he walks off, Sophia watches him go, her thoughts swirling. There's something enigmatic about him, something she can't quite place. He's unlike anyone she's ever met, thoughtful, yet reserved, confident, yet humble. And yet, there's also an air of mystery about him, as though he's hiding something. The question is, what? The next time Sophia visits, Ethan greets her with a knowing smile. "Back again?" he teases gently, setting a menu in front of her. "I could say the same about you," she counters, raising an eyebrow. "Don't you ever take a day off?" "Not unless I have to," he replies, leaning against the edge of the table. "Work keeps me grounded." "Grounded?" Sophia repeats, intrigued. That's an interesting choice of words. "It's easy to lose yourself when you're constantly chasing something," Ethan explains. "Money, success, validation, they're all fleeting. Work reminds me of who I am, not what I've done." Sophia stares at him, momentarily stunned by the depth of his insight. Most people wouldn't think twice about such statements, dismissing them as platitudes, but Ethan speaks with conviction, as though he's lived these truths rather than merely read them in a self-help book. "What about relationships?" she asks suddenly, surprising herself with the question. "Do you think they ground us too, or do they complicate things?" Ethan considers this carefully before answering. "Both, I suppose. Relationships force us to confront parts of ourselves we'd rather ignore. They challenge us, push us, sometimes even break us. But if we're lucky, they also heal us." Sophia feels a lump rise in her throat. His words resonate deeply, striking a chord she didn't realize was still raw. Her marriage had been a series of compromises, sacrifices, and ultimately failures. She told herself she was better off alone, that independence was preferable to vulnerability. Yet sitting here now, listening to Ethan speak so candidly, she wonders if she's been lying to herself all along. As the weeks pass, Sophia begins to notice changes in herself. She looks forward to her visits to Le Jardin, not just for the food or the atmosphere, but for the chance to talk to Ethan. Their conversations become a kind of therapy, a safe space where she can voice her fears and frustrations without fear of judgment. But alongside the comfort comes doubt. Who is this man, really? Why does he work as a waiter when he clearly possesses intelligence and insight far beyond his apparent station? Is he running from something, hiding from someone? One evening, after a particularly intense discussion about the nature of happiness, Sophia blurts out, "Why are you here, Ethan?" He freezes mid-motion, his hand hovering above the tray he's holding. For a brief moment, she thinks he might walk away, brush off the question, or deflect with humor. Instead, he sets the tray down and meets her gaze squarely. "I could ask you the same thing," he says quietly. "Why do you keep coming back?" Sophia opens her mouth to respond, then closes it again. She doesn't have an answer, not one she's willing to admit aloud anyway. So, instead, she deflects. "Maybe I just like the food." Ethan chuckles softly, but there's a flicker of sadness in his eyes. "Maybe," he agrees. "Or maybe we're both looking for something we haven't found yet." The honesty in his voice takes her breath away. For the first time, she allows herself to entertain the possibility that Ethan might understand her better than anyone else ever has. That maybe, just maybe, he's searching for the same thing she is. As Sophia leaves the restaurant that night, she glances back over her shoulder, catching sight of Ethan clearing tables. There's a quiet dignity in the way he works, a sense of purpose that makes her heart ache in ways she doesn't fully understand. If you're curious to see how this story unfolds, if you want to know whether Sophia and Ethan will find what they're searching for, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring stories like this to life, exploring the complexities of human connection in all its forms. It's a rainy Tuesday evening when Sophia steps into Le Jardin, her coat damp from the downpour outside. She looks tired, more so than usual. Her shoulders are slumped, her makeup slightly smudged, and there's a heaviness in her gait that Ethan notices immediately. "Rough day?" he asks as he pulls out her chair, his tone gentle but probing. Sophia exhales sharply, sinking into the seat with a mixture of relief and resignation. You could say that. Ethan doesn't press further, not yet. Instead, he places a glass of water in front of her and retreats to give her space. But as the minutes pass and she sits silently, staring out the window at the rain-soaked streets, he can't help but feel a pang of concern. Something about her demeanor tonight feels different, fragile, almost broken. When he returns with her usual order, a dish she's grown fond of, he hesitates before speaking. "Would you like to talk about it?" Sophia looks up at him, startled by the question. For a moment, she considers brushing him off with a polite, "I'm fine." But then something shifts in her expression, a flicker of vulnerability, and she shakes her head slowly. "Not here," she murmurs. "Too many ears." Ethan nods, understanding without needing further explanation. He glances around the nearly empty dining room, then leans in slightly. "There is a place I go sometimes after my shift. Quiet. Private. If you'd like, we could talk there." His offer catches her off guard. It's bold, unexpected, and yet strangely comforting. She studies him for a long moment, searching for any hint of ulterior motive, but all she sees is sincerity. "All right," she says finally, surprising herself with the decision. "But only if you promise not to make me regret it." Ethan smiles faintly, a gesture that doesn't quite reach his eyes. "I'll do my best." After closing time, Ethan leads Sophia through the quiet streets of the city, their footsteps echoing softly against the wet pavement. The rain has slowed to a drizzle, leaving the air cool and crisp. They walk in silence, the kind that feels companionable rather than awkward, until they arrive at a secluded park overlooking the harbor. The view is breathtaking, even more so under the cover of night. The lights of the city reflect off the water, creating a shimmering tapestry of gold and silver. A wooden bench sits tucked beneath an old oak tree, sheltered from the lingering mist. "This is beautiful," Sophia whispers, her voice tinged with awe. She hadn't expected this, hadn't expected him to show her something so intimate, so personal. "It's one of my favorite spots," Ethan admits, sitting down beside her. "Helps me clear my head." They sit in silence for a while, listening. to the distant hum of traffic and the occasional splash of waves against the shore. Finally, Sophia turns to him, her expression guarded but curious. "Why did you bring me here?" Ethan meets her gaze steadily, his dark eyes reflecting the soft glow of the city lights. "Because I think you needed it, and because I wanted to understand you better." His honesty disarms her. For weeks, they've danced around each other, sharing thoughts, exchanging philosophies, but always within the safe boundaries of the restaurant. Here, away from prying eyes and societal expectations, they're just two people, raw, unfiltered, human. "I got some bad news today," Sophia begins haltingly, her voice barely above a whisper. "One of my biggest investors pulled out, said they didn't believe in my vision anymore." She pauses, swallowing hard as the weight of the words settles between them. "It's not the money, it's the rejection. Like everything I've worked for, doesn't matter." Ethan listens intently, his expression unreadable but empathetic. When she finishes, he doesn't offer platitudes or empty reassurances. Instead, he says simply, "Do you still believe in your vision?" Sophia blinks, caught off guard by the question. "Of course I do. But what does it matter if no one else does?" "That's where you're wrong," Ethan replies firmly. "It matters more than anything. Belief is the foundation of everything. We build. Without it, even the strongest structures collapse." His words strike a chord deep within her, reigniting a spark she thought had been extinguished. For the first time in days, she feels a glimmer of hope, not certainty, but possibility. "But how do you keep believing?" she asks, her voice trembling with emotion. "When everyone doubts you, when everything feels impossible, how do you hold on?" Ethan hesitates, his gaze drifting toward the horizon. "By remembering why you started in the first place, by finding someone or something that reminds you of who you are." As he speaks, his eyes meet hers, and for a fleeting moment, Sophia feels seen in a way she hasn't in years. Not as a successful entrepreneur, not as a divorced woman, not as a figurehead in her industry, but as herself. Flawed, fragile, and fiercely determined. The conversation continues late into the night, weaving between moments of laughter and introspection. They talk about their fears, their dreams, the sacrifices they've made along the way. Sophia learns that Ethan once walked away from everything he'd built because he felt suffocated by success. Ethan discovers that Sophia's relentless drive stems from a childhood spent proving herself to a world that doubted her. By the time they part ways, both are changed, not dramatically, but subtly. There's a newfound intimacy between them, a shared understanding that transcends words. As Sophia climbs into her car, she finds herself smiling despite the chaos of her life. For the first time in months, she feels lighter. But as Ethan watches her drive away, a shadow of doubt crosses his mind. He knows he's falling for her, not because of her status or beauty, but because of the person she reveals when the masks fall away. Yet he also knows that revealing his true identity would shatter the fragile trust they've built. And so, he resolves to tread carefully, cherishing each moment while it lasts. If you're invested in Sophia and Ethan's journey, if you want to know whether their connection will withstand the challenges ahead, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Every subscription helps us continue crafting stories that explore the complexities of love, identity, and authenticity. In the next chapter, tensions rise as Sophia begins to question Ethan's mysterious past. Will she uncover the truth? And if she does, will it bring them closer or tear them apart? The days following their late-night conversation at the park feel different for Sophia. There's a newfound warmth in her interactions with Ethan, subtle but undeniable. She finds herself smiling more often, laughing at his dry humor, and even lingering longer during meals just to hear him speak. It's as though a weight has been lifted, replaced by something lighter yet equally profound, hope. But alongside the hope comes unease. One evening, as she sits at her usual table, sipping a glass of red wine, Sophia catches herself staring at Ethan across the room. He's helping another customer, his movements fluid and precise, his demeanor calm and composed. To anyone else, he might seem like an ordinary waiter, a man simply doing his job. But to Sophia, he feels extraordinary, too extraordinary, perhaps. Her thoughts spiral. Who is he really? The question gnaws at her, refusing to be ignored. How could someone with such insight, such wisdom, choose to spend his days serving tables? What is he hiding? She shakes her head slightly, trying to dismiss the nagging doubt. After all, hadn't they shared something real that night at the park? Hadn't he opened up to her in ways few people ever had? Still, the questions linger, feeding on her insecurities and fears. Sophia's internal conflict intensifies when a colleague spots her at Le Jardin one evening. Rachel, a sharp-tongued executive who thrives on gossip, approaches Sophia's table with a smirk. "Well, well," Rachel drawls, glancing pointedly at Ethan as he clears plates nearby. "I didn't realize you were slumming it these days, Sophia." Sophia stiffens, her grip tightening around her wine glass. "What are you talking about?" Rachel raises an eyebrow, feigning innocence. "Oh, nothing. Just interesting, isn't it? Someone like you spending so much time with—" She trails off, waving a hand dismissively toward Ethan. "Well, you know." The implication hangs heavy in the air. Sophia feels heat rise to her cheeks, not from embarrassment, but from anger. Who is Rachel to judge? What does she know about connection, about authenticity? "Nothing. I think I'll decide who deserves my time," Sophia replies coolly, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. "And if you'll excuse me, I'd rather not waste mine on idle chatter." Rachel smirks again, clearly unfazed by Sophia's retort. "Suit yourself. Just don't forget where you came from, or who you're supposed to be." As Rachel walks away, Sophia exhales sharply, her hands trembling slightly. The comment stings more than she cares to admit. For years, she's prided herself on being above societal judgment, on forging her own path regardless of what others thought. Yet now, faced with Rachel's thinly veiled criticism, she can't help but wonder, is she making a mistake? Is she letting her emotions cloud her judgment? Later that night, after most of the customers have left, Sophia corners Ethan near the bar. Her expression is conflicted, part frustration, part desperation. "Why won't you tell me anything about yourself?" she demands, her voice low but charged with emotion. "Every time I ask, you change the subject or deflect. Do you think I'm stupid? That I haven't noticed how unusual you are?" Ethan freezes, caught off guard by the intensity of her words. He opens his mouth to respond, then closes it again, struggling to find the right answer. Finally, he sighs deeply, running a hand through his hair. "It's not about thinking you're stupid," he says quietly. "It's about protecting what we have. You see me differently here, in this place, in this role. If that changes—" He trails off, leaving the sentence unfinished, but Sophia understands, or at least she thinks she does. She feels a pang of guilt for doubting him, for allowing Rachel's words to plant seeds of suspicion in her mind. "And yet, you're asking me to trust you blindly," she whispers, her voice breaking slightly. "But how can I, when I don't even know who you are?" Ethan meets her gaze, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and resolve. "You do know me, Sophia, better than almost anyone else. The rest, it doesn't matter." His words should reassure her, but instead they only deepen her turmoil, because deep down she knows he's right and wrong all at once. She does know him, the man who listens without judgment, who challenges her to think deeper, who makes her feel alive, in ways she hasn't felt in years. But she also knows there's more to the story, something he's not telling her. That night, as Ethan walks home under the dim glow of streetlights, he wrestles with his own doubts. He sees the way Sophia looks at him, sometimes with admiration, sometimes with confusion, and wonders if he's made a terrible mistake. By keeping his identity hidden, he's protected himself from rejection, yes, but he's also denied her the chance to truly know him. He remembers the night at the park, the way she opened up to him without hesitation. She trusted him enough to share her fears, her vulnerabilities. Shouldn't he do the same? But what if revealing the truth ruins everything? What if she sees him differently, as just another wealthy man playing games? The thought terrifies him, not because he fears losing her respect, but because he fears losing her, losing the connection they've built, fragile though it may be. For now, he decides to stay silent, to cherish each moment they have together before the inevitable unraveling. But he knows it's only a matter of time before the truth comes out. And when it does, it will change everything. As the tension between Sophia and Ethan reaches a boiling point, one thing becomes clear. Neither of them can keep running from the truth forever. Will Sophia uncover Ethan's secret? And if she does, will their bond survive the revelation? If you're eager to find out what happens next, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Your support allows us to continue telling stories that explore the complexities of love, trust, and identity. In the next chapter, secrets will be revealed, lives will be changed, and nothing will ever be the same again. It's a crisp autumn evening when Sophia arrives at Le Jardin, her mind still swirling with unanswered questions about Ethan. She's dressed impeccably, a tailored navy blue dress paired with pearl earrings, but there's an unease beneath her polished exterior. Over the past few days, she's tried to push aside her doubts, telling herself that what she feels for Ethan is real, regardless of who he is or isn't. But Rachel's words echo in her mind like a persistent whisper. Just don't forget where you came from or who you're supposed to be. As she steps inside the restaurant, something feels different. The atmosphere is charged, almost electric. Servers move briskly between tables, their expressions tense but focused. At the far end of the room, a group of sharply dressed individuals gathers near the bar, speaking in hushed tones. Among them stands Marcel, the elderly owner of Le Jardin, his usually calm demeanor replaced by nervous energy. Sophia frowns, scanning the room for Ethan. When she finally spots him, her breath catches in her throat. He's no longer wearing his simple waiter's uniform. Instead, he's dressed in a sleek black suit that fits him like a second skin, his posture commanding attention without effort. His dark eyes scan the crowd, sharp and calculating, until they land on her. For a moment, time seems to stop. Sophia's heart pounds as she takes in the scene. The expensive watches on the wrists of the men around him, the deferential nods from everyone within earshot. Whatever this is, it's clear that Ethan is at the center of it. Before she can process what's happening, Marcel approaches her with a nervous smile. "Ms. Hartley, I'm so glad you're here. Mr. Carter has been asking for you." "Mr. Carter?" Sophia repeats, her voice barely above a whisper. The name sends a jolt through her, a name she recognizes all too well. Ethan Carter, founder and CEO of Carter Tech, one of the most innovative tech companies in the world. A man worth billions. Her gaze snaps back to Ethan, who is now walking toward her with measured steps. Up close, he looks exactly the same. Those piercing eyes, that faintly amused smile, but everything about him feels foreign, unreachable. "Sophia," he says softly, stopping just inches away. "I wanted to tell you—" She cuts him off, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. "Tell me what, Ethan? That you've been lying to me this whole time? That everything we've shared, all those conversations, all those moments, they were built on a foundation of lies?" Ethan winces, visibly pained by her accusation. "No, Sophia, I never lied to you. I just didn't tell you everything. And that makes it better?" She shoots back, her voice rising slightly. Heads turn in their direction, but she doesn't care. All she can see is the man standing in front of her, the man she thought she knew. "You let me believe you were someone else, someone ordinary, someone I could actually relate to." "I am still that person," Ethan insists, his tone urgent. "This," he gestures vaguely at his surroundings, "isn't who I am. It's what I do. I left my old life because it was suffocating me, because no one saw me as anything more than a paycheck or a title. Working here, being with you, it gave me a chance to start over, to be seen for who I really am." Sophia shakes her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "But how can I trust that now? How do I know you didn't come into my life because of who I am, because of what I represent?" Ethan reaches out to touch her arm, but she pulls away instinctively. "That's not why I stayed," he says firmly. "I stayed because of how you made me feel, because you challenged me, because you reminded me of what it means to be human." His words hit their mark, stirring emotions she spent years burying. For a brief moment, she wants to believe him, to throw caution to the wind, and embrace the connection they've built. But fear holds her back. fear of being hurt, fear of being used. "I need time," she whispers finally, stepping away from him. "I need to think." Without waiting for a response, she turns and walks out of the restaurant, leaving behind a room full of curious eyes and a man whose heart feels like it's breaking. Outside, the cool night air does little to calm Sophia's racing thoughts. She leans against the hood of her car, her hands shaking as she tries to make sense of everything. Part of her wants to march back inside and demand answers, to confront Ethan about every lie of omission, every carefully constructed facade. But another part of her, the part that remembers the man who listened to her fears, who encouraged her dreams, who made her laugh in ways no one else ever had, refuses to give up on him entirely. Meanwhile, inside the restaurant, Ethan watches her go, his chest tight with regret. He knows he should have told her sooner, should have trusted her enough to share the truth before it spiraled out of control. But fear had kept him silent, fear of losing the one person